There are exactly 43 ways to open a chess game, and Samantha Gray knew every single one of them by the time she was 9 years old. But there's no opening move for grief, no strategy for the kind of loneliness that follows you into empty apartments and fills the spaces between your heartbeats with silence so loud it drowns out everything else. She learned that the hard way 3 years ago when her father's hospital monitor flatlined and took with it the only person who ever looked at her mind and saw beauty instead of something broken. Now she pours coffee for strangers. La Vela Bistro sits on the corner of 9th and Ashland, like a secret someone forgot to keep. All exposed brick and Edison bulbs casting amber shadows across tables that have heard 1,000 conversations and remembered none of them. The kind of place where the pasta's good enough to keep you coming back, but not good enough to make you stay longer than you have to. Samantha's been working there for 2 years, moving through the dinner rush with the mechanical precision of someone who's perfected the art of being present without actually being there. Smile, take the order, refill the water, repeat. It's a rhythm that requires nothing from her except her body, and that's exactly why she chose it. Her manager, Rita, a woman whose entire personality seems constructed from cigarette smoke and expired dreams, likes to say that Samantha's wasting her potential. "You're too smart for this," she'll mutter while counting register receipts, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "Too pretty, too young, too something." But Rita doesn't understand that potential is just another word for expectation, and Samantha's tired of disappointing people. Her father used to call her his little grandmaster, used to set up the board on their kitchen table every Sunday morning, brewing tea that was always too strong and making jokes that were always too corny. He'd study her moves with this look in his eyes, this pride that made her feel like she could calculate the entire universe if she just thought hard enough. Then the cancer came, aggressive and efficient, and suddenly all her intelligence meant nothing because she couldn't solve the one problem that mattered. So she quit chess, quit competing, quit the university scholarship she'd earned, quit everything that reminded her that being smart hadn't been smart enough to save him. Now it's just her and the bistro and the endless parade of faces that blur together into one forgettable mass of hunger and small talk. Except for him, the man in the corner booth, the one who always sits with his back to the wall, who orders black coffee at 9 p.m. and nurses it until closing, who wears suits that cost more than her monthly rent and watches the room like he's counting exits. Simon Jordan. She doesn't know his name yet, but she's noticed him. You can't not notice a man like that, the way you can't not notice a storm rolling in across a flat. Horizon. He's been coming in for 3 weeks now, always alone, always silent except for his order, always leaving cash on the table with the kind of tip that makes Rita raise her eyebrows and whisper theories about drug dealers and divorce lawyers. Samantha doesn't care what he is. She's learned that curiosity is just another way to get hurt, another opening for the world to slip in and remind you that nothing good lasts and everyone leaves eventually. But tonight feels different. Maybe it's the rain hammering against the windows like it's trying to break in, turning the street outside into a watercolor painting of blurred headlights and drowning neon. Maybe it's the fact that the dinner rush ended an hour ago and the bistro's nearly empty, except for Simon in his corner and an elderly couple by the window who've been holding hands across their table like they're afraid of letting go. Maybe it's because Samantha's exhausted in that bone-deep way that makes everything feel slightly unreal, like she's watching her own life from somewhere outside her body. Or maybe it's because she made a mistake. She brought her father's chess book to work tonight, the one with the cracked spine and his handwriting in the margins. Notes about Sicilian defenses and King's Indian attacks written in the careful print of a man who believed that knowledge was the only inheritance worth leaving. She's been carrying it in her bag for months, unable to read it, but unable to leave it at home either, like some kind of talisman against the emptiness. During her break, she pulled it out without thinking, sat at the corner of the bar, and opened it to a random page. Rui Lopez opening, her father's favorite. She can still hear his voice explaining it, patient and warm, the way he'd move the pieces with those big hands that always smelled like Old Spice and printer ink. She doesn't realize she's crying until a tear hits the page and smudges his handwriting. Interesting choice. The voice comes from directly behind her, low and textured like gravel wrapped in velvet, and Samantha nearly jumps out of her skin. She turns to find Simon Jordan standing there, closer than she expected, close enough that she can see the gray threading through his dark hair at the temples, the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the way his eyes are the color of slate before a storm. Up close, he's even more imposing than she thought, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that seems to bend the air around him. "I'm sorry," she manages, quickly wiping her face with the back of her hand. He nods toward the book. Ruy Lopez. Solid opening. Classical. Most people your age prefer the flashier stuff. Queen's Gambit's having a moment, I hear. There's something in his tone she can't quite place. Not mockery, but not quite kindness either. More like recognition. The way you might acknowledge someone speaking your native language in a foreign country. "My father taught me," she says, and immediately regrets it because she doesn't talk about her father, not to anyone, and certainly not to strange men in expensive suits who probably think waitresses are interchangeable parts in the machinery of their convenience. But Simon just nods, like this makes perfect sense. "Good teacher. The best. Past tense." It's not a question, and Samantha feels something crack open in her chest, some carefully maintained seal she's been holding in place through sheer force of will. He died 3 years ago. Simon's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his eyes, some flicker of understanding that makes her think maybe he knows what it's like to lose someone who mattered. He reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a small wooden box, sets it on the bar between them. When he opens it, she sees a travel chess set, the pieces worn smooth from handling, the board folded in the middle with a hinge that's been repaired more than once. "Play me," he says. Samantha stares at the board, then at him, then back at the board. I haven't played in years." Muscle memory, it comes back. He's already setting up the pieces, his movements efficient and practiced. "One game. If you win, I'll leave you alone. If I win, you tell me why someone who clearly loves chess is working in a restaurant instead of playing it." There's a challenge in his voice, but also something else, something that sounds almost like loneliness. And Samantha recognizes it because she's been carrying the same weight for so long, she's forgotten what it feels like to stand up straight. She should say no, should tell him she's on break and he should return to his table, and they should maintain the careful distance between server and customer that keeps the world organized and predictable. Instead, she hears herself say, "White or black?" The corner of his mouth twitches. Not quite a smile, but close. Lady's choice, she takes white. Always take white when you can. Her father's voice in her head, steady as a metronome. The player with white moves first, and in chess, tempo is everything. She moves her king's pawn forward 2 squares. E4, the most common opening in chess, the one that's been played millions of times across thousands of years, and yet her hand is shaking like she's defusing a bomb. Simon responds immediately. E5, mirroring her, the beginning of a conversation in a language she thought she'd forgotten. They play in silence at first. The only sounds are the soft click of wooden pieces on the board, and the rain's percussion against the windows, and the distant clatter of Rita cleaning up in the kitchen. Samantha can feel her mind waking up, neurons firing in patterns she hasn't accessed in years, seeing the board not as it is, but as it could be. 3 moves ahead, 5 moves ahead, the branching possibilities spreading out like a tree of light in her consciousness. It's terrifying and exhilarating, and it hurts in the way that blood rushing back into a sleeping limb hurts. Painful proof that something you thought was dead is actually just dormant. Simon plays well. Better than well. He's aggressive but not reckless. Patient but not passive. The kind of player who understands that chess is about controlling space and time, about making your opponent react to you instead of the other way around. She can tell he's used to winning, can see it in the confidence of his moves, the way he doesn't hesitate, doesn't second guess. This is a man who's accustomed to getting what he wants. But Samantha's father didn't raise a daughter who backed down from challenges. She sacrifices a bishop on move 12 and watches Simon's eyes narrow slightly as he takes it, probably wondering if she's made a mistake or if she's setting a trap. She's setting a trap. 2 moves later, she springs it, her knight forking his king and rook, And for the first time since they started playing, Simon pauses. Really pauses. Studies the board like it's personally offended him. Clever, he murmurs, moving his king to safety and sacrificing the rook. Your father taught you that? He taught me to see the board as a story, Samantha says, bringing her knight back to center. Every piece is a character. Every move is a choice, and every choice has consequences. Sounds like life. He said chess was better than life because at least in chess, you can see all the pieces. Simon looks up at her then, really looks at her, and Samantha feels suddenly exposed, like he's reading something in her face she didn't mean to write there. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was. Her throat tightens. He was everything. They keep playing, and somewhere around move 20, Samantha realizes two things simultaneously. First, she's going to win. She can see the path now, clear as daylight, the sequence of moves that will corner his king and leave him no escape. And second, she doesn't want the game to end, because when it ends, she'll go back to being just a waitress, and he'll go back to being just a customer, and this strange, unexpected moment of connection will evaporate like steam. But chess doesn't care what you want. Chess only cares about the truth of the position. She takes his queen on move 24 and watches something like surprise flicker across his face. He's not used to this, she realizes. Not used to losing, probably surrounded by people who let him win because of who he is, whatever that is. But Samantha doesn't know who he is. And even if she did, she wouldn't throw the game. Her father taught her better than that. Taught her that respect means playing your best always, because anything less is just another form of lying. 3 moves later, she has him in check. 2 moves after that, she has him in checkmate. Checkmate, she whispers, and the word feels like a prayer and a confession and a resurrection all at once. Simon stares at the board for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The elderly couple by the window is leaving, pulling on their coats and stepping out into the rain, and Rita's turned off half the lights in the dining room, the universal signal that closing time is approaching. Samantha holds her breath, suddenly afraid she's made some terrible mistake, broken some unspoken rule she didn't know existed. Then Simon does something she doesn't expect. He laughs. It's not a big laugh, not loud or performative, just a low chuckle that sounds rusty, like a door that hasn't been opened in years. When's the last time someone beat you? Samantha asks before she can stop herself. Simon's smile fades, but not in a bad way. More like he's considering the question seriously. Honestly, I can't remember. Years, maybe. Everyone I play either isn't good enough or doesn't try hard enough. He starts resetting the pieces, his movements careful and deliberate. You're different. I don't know who you are, Samantha says, and realizes as she says it that it's true and that it matters. I don't know if you're someone important or someone dangerous or someone I should be afraid of. I just know you play chess and you drink black coffee and you tip well. Something dark crosses Simon's face. There and gone so fast she almost misses it. Would it change things? If you knew? I don't know, she admits. Would it? He doesn't answer. Instead, he says, tomorrow night, same time, rematch. It's not a question, but it's not quite a command either. Somewhere in between, leaving space for her to say no if she wants to. Samantha knows she should say no, knows that whatever this is, it's probably a bad idea, probably the kind of thing that leads to complications she doesn't need in a life she's worked hard to keep simple and safe and numb. But she's tired of being numb, tired of sleepwalking through her own existence. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt something tonight, felt her mind working the way it used to, felt connected to her father's memory in a way that didn't just hurt, felt seen by another human being in a way she'd forgotten was possible. Okay, she says, tomorrow night. Simon nods, stands, pulls out his wallet, and leaves $300 on the bar. Way too much for a cup of coffee and a chess game. But before Samantha can protest, he's already walking toward the door, his coat swirling around him like a cape. He pauses at the threshold, rain and streetlight silhouetting him, and looks back. You're better than you think you are, he says. At chess. At everything, probably. Don't waste that. Then he's gone, disappearing into the storm, and Samantha's left standing at the bar with a chess set and $300 and a feeling in her chest that might be hope, or might be terror, or might be both. Rita emerges from the kitchen, sees the money and whistles low. "What the hell did you do to earn that?" "I beat him," Samantha says, still staring at the door. "Beat? Him at what?" "Chess," Rita snorts. "Honey, I don't think that man cares about chess." And maybe Rita's right. Maybe this isn't about chess at all. Maybe it's about two lonely people finding each other in the margins of their lives, in the spaces between who they are and who they used to be. Maybe it's about the way grief can make you invisible even to yourself, and how sometimes it takes a stranger to remind you that you're still here, still breathing, still capable of feeling something other than the endless ache of absence. Samantha picks up her father's chess book, runs her fingers over his handwriting, and for the first time in 3 years, she doesn't feel like she's betraying his memory by moving forward. She feels like maybe, just maybe, this is what he would have wanted. For her to play again, to live again, to remember that being smart and being alive aren't mutually exclusive. She doesn't know that Simon Jordan is the head of the most powerful crime family in the city. Doesn't know that his name makes hardened criminals nervous and that his decisions have ended lives and destroyed empires. Doesn't know that the man who just asked her to play chess tomorrow is the same man who, earlier that evening, ordered the execution of a rival's lieutenant in a warehouse on the South Side. Doesn't know that his world is built on violence and blood, and the kind of darkness that doesn't wash off no matter how hard you scrub. All she knows is that tomorrow night she'll set up the board again, and the night after that, and the night after that, and somewhere in the space between those games, something will grow, something neither of them planned for, something that will change everything. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Samantha Gray goes home to her small apartment with its secondhand furniture and its walls that echo with silence. She makes tea that's too strong, just like her father used to make it. She opens his chess book to the first page, where he writes her name in careful letters above a dedication that says, "For my brilliant girl, may you always see the board clearly and play bravely." And for the first time in 3 years, she reads it without crying. Outside, the rain continues to fall, washing the city clean, and somewhere across town, Simon Jordan sits in his penthouse office overlooking the glittering skyline, a glass of whiskey in his hand and a chess set on his desk. He's replaying the game in his mind, analyzing where he went wrong, where she outmaneuvered him, and he's smiling. Actually smiling. His second in command, Marcus, a man built like a tank with the personality of a sledgehammer, watches from the doorway with barely concealed concern. "You're in a good mood," Marcus says carefully. "That's unusual." "I lost tonight," Simon replies, moving a piece on the board. "You never lose." "I did tonight, to a waitress in a bistro who didn't know who I was and didn't care." Simon takes a sip of whiskey, savoring the burn. "It was the most honest thing that's happened to me in years." Marcus shifts uncomfortably. "Boss, you know getting attached to civilians is—" "I'm not attached," Simon interrupts. But even as he says it, he knows it's a lie. He's been thinking about her all night, about the way her hands shook on the first move but steadied as the game progressed, about the grief in her eyes when she mentioned her father, about the fierce intelligence that radiated from her like heat, about the fact that she beat him fairly. No deception, no agenda, just pure skill and strategy. In Simon's world, everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. Everyone's playing a game within the game. But Samantha Gray just wanted to play chess. And somehow that simple honesty has cracked something open inside him that he thought was sealed shut years ago. "Just be careful," Marcus says. And there's genuine concern in his voice because Marcus has been with Simon since the beginning. Since Simon's father died and left him an empire built on fear and blood. Since Simon was 23 years old and suddenly responsible for hundreds of lives and millions of dollars in decisions that kept him awake at night, staring at the ceiling and wondering if there was any way out that didn't end with him in prison or dead. "I'm always careful," Simon says, but he's still smiling. And that's what worries Marcus most, because Simon Jordan hasn't smiled like that in a very long time. Not since before his father's death, not since before he understood that the family business wasn't something you could walk away from, that the violence was inherited like eye color or bone structure, that once you're in until the end, whatever that end looks like. Chess has always been his escape, the one place where the rules are clear and the violence is metaphorical and you can reset the board and start over as many times as you want. He's played grandmasters, champions, professionals who've dedicated their lives to the game. He's won most of those matches, lost a few, but none of them felt like tonight. None of them felt like meeting someone who speaks your language in a country where you thought you'd always be foreign. Tomorrow night can't come fast enough. And so it begins. The nightly games, the slow unraveling of two carefully constructed walls, the dangerous alchemy that happens when loneliness recognizes itself in another person and decides, against all logic and self-preservation, to reach out. Neither of them knows where this is going. Neither of them understands yet what they're risking. But in chess, as in life, sometimes you have to sacrifice pieces to win the game. Sometimes you have to move forward even when you can't see the whole board. Sometimes you have to trust that the person across from you is playing the same game you are, with the same stakes, the same hopes, the same fear that this might be the last chance either of you gets to feel something real. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, ever felt like your intelligence or your grief or your difference made you an outsider in your own life, hit that subscribe button right now because Samantha's story is just beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. But here's the question I'll leave you with tonight. The one that will haunt Samantha in the days to come. The one that might haunt you too. When you finally find someone who sees you, really sees you, who challenges you and respects you and makes you feel alive again after years of just surviving. What are you willing to risk to keep them? What would you sacrifice? What lines would you cross? And when you discover that the person who saved you might also be the person who destroys you, do you walk away or do you play the game all the way to checkmate? Consequences be damned. The games became a ritual, and rituals have a way of becoming necessities before you even realize you need them. Every night at 9 p.m., Simon Jordan would walk through the doors of La Vela Bistro with rain on his shoulders or snow in his hair or the weight of decisions that would make most men crumble. And every night, Samantha Gray would finish her shift, wipe down her section, and sit across from him with a chessboard between them, like a bridge connecting two islands that were never supposed to meet. They didn't talk much at first, just played. The silence between them was comfortable in a way that surprised them both because neither was used to comfort. Neither trusted it. Neither believed it could last. But it did last. 1 week became 2. 2 became a month. And somewhere in the space between those moves, between the captured pawns and sacrificed knights, between checkmate and rematch, something shifted. Something neither of them had permission to feel but felt anyway, growing in the dark like something wild and dangerous and inevitable. Samantha started to learn things about Simon that didn't come from words but from observation, from the way he played. She learned that he was patient but not passive, that he thought 3 moves ahead but sometimes got lost in his own strategies, that he hated losing but respected a good defeat more than an easy victory. She learned that he drank his coffee black because adding anything felt like weakness, that he wore the same watch every day, a vintage Rolex that looked like it had survived a war, and that sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, his eyes would go distant and dark, like he was seeing something she couldn't, something that haunted him. And Simon, he learned that Samantha was brilliant in a way that had nothing to do with formal education and everything to do with the architecture of her mind, the way she could see patterns where others saw chaos, the way she approached problems like puzzles that just needed the right angle to solve. He learned that she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, that she had to tell when she was about to make an aggressive move. Her left hand would tap twice on the table, and that beneath the grief she wore like armor, there was a fierceness, a refusal to be diminished, that made him want to know everything about her. "Tell me something true," Simon said one night, 3 weeks into their ritual, after she'd beaten him for the 7th time in a row. Samantha looked up from resetting the pieces, her fingers pausing on a black bishop. "What kind of truth?" "Any kind. Something you don't tell people. Something real." She considered this. considered him, considered whether trust was something she could afford. "I dream about my father every night," she said finally. "Same dream. We're playing chess in our old kitchen, and he's teaching me the Sicilian defense, and everything's normal, everything's fine. Then I look down at the board, and all the pieces are melting, turning into water, and when I look up, he's gone, just an empty chair. And I wake up, and for about 5 seconds, I forget he's dead. Then I remember, and it's like losing him all over again." Simon was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wasn't sure he should swallow or spit out. "I dream about my father too," he said, "but in my dreams, he's disappointed, always disappointed, telling me I'm weak, that I'm making the wrong choices, that I'm destroying everything he built. And the worst part is, he's probably right." "What did he build?" Samantha asked, and the question hung in the air between them like smoke. Simon's expression shuddered. "Nothing good." That should have been her first real warning. Should have been the moment she asked the questions that needed asking. The moment she demanded to know who he really was, what he really did, why men in expensive suits sometimes waited for him outside in black cars with tinted windows. But she didn't ask because she didn't want to know, because knowing would mean deciding, and deciding would mean potentially losing this thing they were building. This fragile structure of connection that felt like the only solid ground she'd stood on in years. So she let it go. Let the question dissolve. Reset the board and play another game. But the universe has a way of forcing answers on people who refuse to ask questions. It happened on a Thursday night, 6 weeks into their ritual, during the dinner rush when the bistro was packed and loud, and Samantha was moving between tables with practiced efficiency, her mind half on orders and half on the chess problem Simon had left her with the night before. A complex endgame scenario he'd set up, asking her how she'd win from what looked like an impossible position. She was so focused on mentally moving pieces that she almost didn't notice the man who walked in, almost didn't see the way the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, almost didn't catch the look that passed between Simon, sitting in his usual corner, and this newcomer. But she did notice. And once you notice something like that, you can't notice it. The man was tall and thin, dressed in a suit that was expensive but worn, like he'd been wearing it for 3 days straight. His face was all sharp angles and hard edges, the kind of face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile sometime around childhood and never bothered to relearn. He walked straight to Simon's table without looking at the menu or waiting to be seated, and Samantha watched as Simon's entire body language changed, watching him transform from the man who played chess and talked about dreams into something else entirely. Something cold and dangerous and utterly in control. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could read the tension in their postures, could see the way the thin man's hands kept clenching and unclenching, could see the way Simon's expression never changed, neutral as stone, giving nothing away. The conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes. Then the thin man left, moving quickly, and Simon sat back in his booth, his jaw tight, his eyes tracking the man's exit like a predator watching prey. Samantha brought him his coffee without being asked, set it down carefully. "Friend of yours?" "Business associate," Simon said, and his voice was different, harder, stripped of the warmth she'd gotten used to. "What kind of business?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach drop. A warning, a wall going up. "The kind you don't want to know about." "Maybe I do." "No," Simon said, and there was finality in that single syllable. "You don't. Trust me." But trust is a funny thing. It requires honesty, and honesty was the one thing Simon couldn't give her. Not completely, not yet. So instead he changed the subject, asked her about her day, and steered the conversation back to safe waters. Samantha left him because she was a coward, because she was afraid that knowing the truth would mean losing him, and she wasn't ready to lose someone else she cared about. Except you can't outrun the truth. It always catches up eventually. Rita pulled her aside 2 days later, during the afternoon prep before the dinner shift, her expression serious in a way that made Samantha's pulse quicken. "We need to talk about your boyfriend," Rita said, lighting a cigarette, even though smoking wasn't allowed inside. He's not my boyfriend, Samantha said automatically. We just play chess. Rita snorted. Honey, I've been watching people lie to themselves for 40 years, and that's some premium grade self-deception you've got going there. You're in love with him. The words hit Samantha like a physical blow, because hearing them out loud made them real, made them something she couldn't deny or rationalize or pretend was just friendship, or just chess, or just two lonely people passing time. I barely know him, she whispered. That's my point. Rita took a long drag, exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. Do you know what he does? Who is he? He's in business. He's in the business, Samantha. Simon Jordan. You really don't know that name? Samantha shook her head, but something cold was spreading through her chest, some instinct that knew what was coming before Rita said it. He runs the Jordan family. It has been almost 10 years since his father died. Drugs, gambling, protection rackets, the whole 9 yards. He's not just connected to organized crime, sweetheart. He is an organized crime in this city, and you've been playing chess with him every night like he's some kind of romantic hero instead of a man who's probably ordered more deaths than you've served dinners. The kitchen tilted. Samantha grabbed the counter to steady herself, her mind racing, trying to reconcile the man who talked about his dreams and played chess with careful precision and looked at her like she was something precious with the monster Rita was describing. You're wrong, she said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. I'm not wrong. Google him. It's all there, or at least the parts that made it to trial before witnesses disappeared or evidence got lost. He's dangerous, Samantha, and the fact that he's interested in you makes you dangerous too, whether you want to be or not. That night, Samantha did what she should have done weeks ago. She Googled Simon Jordan, and what she found made her wish she'd stayed ignorant. Articles about racketeering trials that fell apart, investigations that went nowhere, rival gang members found dead in alleys or floating in the river. A grainy photo from 5 years ago showing Simon leaving a courthouse, his expression blank, his lawyer beside him. The headline reading, Jordan walks free again, witnesses recent testimony. Another article about his father, Vincent Jordan, a man who'd built an empire on fear and violence, who died of a heart attack in his sleep, leaving his only son to inherit a kingdom of blood. Samantha read until her eyes burned and her hands shook and she felt sick with the weight of what she'd learned. This was who she'd been playing chess with. This was who she'd been opening up to, trusting, maybe even falling for. A criminal, a killer, a man whose world was so far removed from hers that they might as well have been living on different planets. She didn't go to work the next day, called in sick, which she never did, and spent the day in her apartment staring at the walls and trying to figure out what she was supposed to do with this information. The smart thing would be to cut him off completely, to stop going to the bistro at night, to disappear from his life before she got pulled any deeper into whatever darkness surrounded him. But when 9 p.m. came, she found herself getting dressed anyway. Found herself walking to La Vela through streets that suddenly felt more dangerous, more full of shadows and secrets. Found herself pushing through the door and seeing Simon in his usual booth, the chess set already arranged, 2 cups of coffee waiting. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression told her that he knew that she knew that everything had changed. You came, he said, and there was surprise in his voice, and maybe relief. I almost didn't. Samantha sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. I know who you are now, what you are. Simon nodded slowly. I wondered when you'd find out. Honestly surprised it took this long. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have kept playing if I had? If I'd introduced myself that first night as Simon Jordan, head of organized crime, would you have sat down across from me? No, Samantha admitted. That's why. He pushed one of the coffee cups toward her. I like being just Simon to you. Just a guy who plays chess. Not the legacy, not the business, not the reputation, just me. But that's not who you are, Samantha said, and her voice cracked. You're not just some guy. You're a criminal. You hurt people. She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the word kill out loud because saying it would make it too real. I do what I have to do to survive in the world I was born into, Simon said, and his voice was quiet but firm. I didn't choose this life, Samantha. It chose me. My father built this empire, and when he died, I inherited it along with all the enemies and obligations and impossible choices that come with it. You think I wanted this? You think I wake up every morning excited to be the person everyone fears? Then leave, Samantha said desperately. Walk away. Start over. Simon laughed, but there was no humor in it. It doesn't work like that. You don't just leave. The people who work for me, they depend on me. The families I protect, they need me. And the enemies I've made, they'd see me leaving as weakness, as an opportunity. I'd be dead within a week, and everyone connected to me would be dead too. He paused, his eyes boring into hers. Including you now. The moment we started these games, the moment people saw us together, you became connected to me. You became a target. The words hit her like ice water. What are you saying? I'm saying that whether you walk away or not, you're already in this. My enemies know about you. They've been watching. And if they think you matter to me, which you do, they'll use you to get to me. That's how this world works. Samantha felt the walls closing in, felt the trap she'd walked into without realizing it. So what am I supposed to do? You have two choices, Simon said. You can disappear. I can arrange for you to relocate. A new city, a new identity, enough money to start over somewhere safe. Or, he hesitated, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. Or you can stay. Let me protect you. Let me keep you safe. And what does that mean? I become what? Your girlfriend? Your property? You become someone I care about who I refuse to let get hurt because of me. Simon reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching. I know what I'm asking. I know it's not fair. But I'm asking anyway because the thought of you leaving, of never seeing you again, of not having these games. His voice roughened. It's the only thing that scares me anymore. Have you ever had someone offer you a choice that wasn't really a choice at all? Where both options lead to loss? Where there's no right answer? Only different versions of wrong? That's where Samantha was, caught between running from the only connection she'd felt in years and staying in a world that could destroy her. What would you do? Would you choose safety, or would you choose the person who makes you feel alive again, even if that person comes with darkness attached? If you're still watching, if you're as invested in Samantha's impossible decision as I am, do me a favor and hit that like button right now, because this story is about to get even more complicated, and you're going to want to remember where you were when everything changed. Samantha looked at Simon's hand, still hovering near hers, offering connection and danger in equal measure. She thought about her father, about what he would say if he were here. He'd probably tell her to run, to choose safety, to not throw her life away on a man who lived in the shadows. But her father had also taught her to play chess, had taught her that sometimes the bravest move is the one that looks like suicide, that sometimes you have to sacrifice everything to win the game. I'll stay, she heard herself say, and watched Simon's expression transform. Watched relief and something deeper, something that looked like love, flooded his features. But I have conditions. Name them. No lies. If I'm staying in your world, I need to know what I'm staying in. No more secrets, no more half-truths. You tell me everything. Simon nodded. Agreed. And I'm not some helpless thing you keep locked away. If I'm a target anyway, then teach me how to protect myself. Teach me how your world works. That's dangerous knowledge. I'm already in danger, might as well be informed of danger. A smile tugged at Simon's mouth, the first real smile she'd seen from him all night. You're remarkable, you know that. I'm terrified, Samantha admitted, but I'm tired of running from things, tired of letting fear make my decisions. Then we'll be terrified together. Simon finally closed the distance, his hand covering hers, warm and solid and real. And I promise you, Samantha, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, even from myself. It was a promise he meant, a promise he would try desperately to keep. But promises made in the dark have a way of breaking in the light, and neither of them knew yet just how much that promise would cost. The next few weeks were an education in a world Samantha never knew existed, a world that operated in the spaces between legal and illegal, between civilization and chaos. Simon kept his word about no more secrets. He showed her his operation, introduced her to his people, explained the complex web of alliances and enmities that governed his life. She met Marcus, his second in command, who looked at her with barely concealed suspicion and told Simon privately that bringing a civilian into their world was a mistake that would get them all killed. She met Elena, Simon's accountant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who managed the money laundering operations and seemed amused by Samantha's presence. She met dozens of others, soldiers and associates, and connected people, and learned to read the hierarchy in how they spoke to Simon, how they looked at him, how they feared and respected him in equal measure. And she learned about the violence. Not firsthand, not yet, but in the stories Simon told her, in the scars he showed her, in the way he'd sometimes come to their chess games with blood on his knuckles that he'd tried to wash off but hadn't quite managed. She learned that his world operated on a brutal logic, where weakness was death and mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford. She learned that the man she was falling in love with had done things that would haunt her if she thought about them too long, had made choices that had ended lives and destroyed families. But she also learned that he hated it, hated the violence, hated the fear, hated the person he had to be to survive. He told her one night, after a particularly brutal confrontation with a rival family that had left two men dead, that he felt like he was drowning in his father's legacy, that every decision he made pulled him deeper into darkness he couldn't escape. Then change it, Samantha said. You're in charge. Make different choices. It's not that simple. Why not? Because the moment I show weakness, the moment I deviate from how things have always been done, someone will see it as an opportunity. Someone will make a move, and people I care about will die. He looked at her meaningfully. You'll die. So you're trapped. We're all trapped. That's the nature of this life. But Samantha's mind didn't work like that. Her mind saw problems as puzzles, saw traps as positions on a chessboard that just needed the right sequence of moves to escape. What if there was a way out, she asked. What if you could restructure things, change the game entirely? There's no way out. There's always a way out. You're just not seeing it yet. Simon looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language, like the concept of escape was so foreign to him, he couldn't even process it. And maybe that's when Samantha realized that she wasn't just falling in love with Simon Jordan. She was becoming invested in saving him, in finding the move that would free him from the prison of his own life. It was arrogant. It was naive. It was dangerous. But it was also very, very her. She started studying his operation the way she'd once studied chess, looking for patterns, for weaknesses, for opportunities. She asked questions that made Marcus nervous and Elena intrigued. She suggested small changes, subtle shifts in how things were done, and was surprised when Simon actually listened, actually implemented some of her ideas. A different approach to a territorial dispute that avoided bloodshed, a negotiation strategy that turned an enemy into a neutral party. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. You're good at this, Simon told her one night, after she'd helped him navigate a complex situation with a corrupt city official. Scary good. It's just chess on a bigger board, Samantha said. Same principles. Control the center, think ahead, know when to sacrifice. And what are you willing to sacrifice? It was a question that would come back to haunt her, because in chess, you sacrifice pieces to win the game. But in life, the pieces are people, and the cost of winning might be more than you're willing to pay. The first real threat came on a cold November night, 2 months into their relationship, when Samantha was closing up the bistro alone. Rita had left early, the other servers had clocked out, and Samantha was doing the final cleanup, her mind on the chess problem Simon had given her earlier, when the door opened and 3 men walked in. She knew immediately something was wrong, knew it in the way they moved, in the way they looked at her, in the predatory calculation in their eyes. We're closed, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. We're not here for food, the lead man said. He was short and stocky with a scar running down his left cheek. We're here for you. Samantha's hand moved to her phone in her pocket, but the man was faster, crossing the distance between them in 2 strides and grabbing her wrist. Simon Jordan's little pet, he said, his breath hot on her face. You're going to come with us, quietly. And if you're smart, You'll stay alive long enough to be useful. Terror flooded her system, but beneath the terror was something else. Anger. Because she'd been right, she was a target, and these men thought she was just some helpless girl they could use as leverage. They didn't know that Simon had been teaching her, preparing her, showing her how to survive in his world. She drove her knee up hard into the man's groin, exactly like Simon had taught her, and when he doubled over, she grabbed the coffee pot from the counter and smashed it across his face. Glass shattered. The man screamed. The other two lunged for her, but Samantha was already moving, already running for the back exit, her heart hammering, her mind racing through the escape plan Simon had made her memorize. She almost made it, almost reached the door. Then hands grabbed her from behind, yanking her back, and she felt something cold and metal press against her temple. "Enough," one of the men growled. "Move again, and I paint the walls with your brain." Samantha froze. This was it. This was the moment where her choice to stay in Simon's world came due, and she realized with crystal clarity that she didn't regret it. Didn't regret choosing him, choosing this, choosing to feel alive again, even if it meant dying. But she wasn't going to die. Not tonight, because the back door exploded inward, and Marcus came through it like a force of nature, gun drawn, followed by 3 other men Samantha recognized from Simon's crew. The man holding her tried to use her as a shield, but Marcus's shot was precise, catching him in the shoulder, and suddenly Samantha was free, being pulled behind Marcus's bulk while gunfire erupted around her, loud and terrifying and surreal. It was over in seconds. The 3 attackers were down, 2 dead, 1 wounded and being restrained. And then Simon was there, bursting through the front door, his face a mask of fury and fear, his eyes scanning the room until they found her. "Samantha," he breathed, and then she was in his arms, shaking, her ears ringing from the gunfire, her mind trying to process what had just happened. "I'm okay," she managed. "I'm okay." "You're not okay. You almost died. They almost—" Simon's voice broke, and she realized he was shaking too, realized that beneath his controlled exterior, he was terrified. "This is my fault. I should have had someone watching you. Should have known they'd make a move." Who were they? Castellano family, rivals. They've been looking for an opening, and I gave them one by caring about you. Simon pulled back, his hands framing her face, his eyes intense. "This is what I was trying to protect you from. This is why people in my world don't get to have normal things, normal relationships. Because everyone you care about becomes a weapon someone can use against you." "Then what do we do?" Samantha asked, and she was surprised by how steady her voice was, how clear her mind felt despite the chaos. "Do I run? Do I hide? Or do we figure out how to win this game?" Simon stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Respect, determination, maybe even hope. "We win," he said, "but winning means going on offense, means making moves that will change everything. Are you ready for that?" Samantha thought about her father, about the lessons he'd taught her, about how chess was just life compressed into 64 squares. She thought about how she'd been hiding for 3 years, how she'd been playing defense against her own grief, her own fear, her own life. And she thought about how Simon had given her a reason to play offense again, to move forward, to fight. "I'm ready," she said. "Teach me how to play your game." And Simon smiled, fierce and dangerous and full of dark promise. "Then let's show them what checkmate really looks like." But neither of them knew yet what that checkmate would cost. Neither of them understood that in the game they were about to play, the stakes weren't just their lives, but their souls. And that winning might mean losing everything that made them human. The question wasn't whether they could win. The question was whether they'd recognize themselves when it was over. War in Simon Jordan's world didn't announce itself with declarations or formal challenges. It came quietly, like winter, creeping in through the cracks until suddenly everything was frozen and you couldn't remember what warmth felt like. The attack on Samantha had been the opening move, a test to see how Simon would respond, and his response would determine whether he kept his empire or lost everything, including the woman who'd somehow become more important to him than power itself. But here's what Simon's enemies didn't understand. what they couldn't have predicted even if they'd studied him for years. Samantha Gray wasn't just some civilian caught in the crossfire. She was a strategist, a chess player who saw patterns where others saw chaos, and she'd been analyzing Simon's world with the same intensity she'd once brought to tournament games. And what she discovered was something Simon himself had been too close to see, that his entire operation was built on his father's outdated playbook, that he was fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's tactics, and that if they wanted to survive, they needed to change the game entirely. "You're thinking about this wrong," Samantha told him 3 days after the attack, sitting in Simon's penthouse office with Marcus and Elena, the core of his inner circle. Her hands were still bandaged from the broken glass, but her mind was sharp as ever. "You're reacting to the Castellanos, playing defense, trying to protect what you have. But defense doesn't win games. You need to think 10 moves ahead," Marcus scoffed. "With all due respect, you've been in this world for 2 months. We've been doing this for decades." "And how's that working out?" Samantha shot back. "You're bleeding territory, losing soldiers, fighting the same battles over and over with the same families. It's a stalemate that's slowly killing you. Unless you change the fundamental structure of the game, you'll keep playing until someone gets lucky and you end up dead." "What are you suggesting?" Simon asked. And there was something in his voice that made Marcus tense, because he recognized that tone, that openness to ideas that went against everything Vincent Jordan had taught them. Samantha stood, walked to the window overlooking the city, all those lights representing lives and choices and possibilities. "Your father built this empire on fear and violence, on controlling territory and eliminating competition. But that model is unsustainable because it requires constant warfare, constant vigilance, constant bloodshed. You can't ever rest, can't ever trust, can't ever be anything except what your enemies expect you to be." She turned back to face them. "What if you became something they couldn't predict? What if you changed the rules entirely?" "You're talking in riddles," Marcus said. "I'm talking about evolution, about transforming your operation from a criminal enterprise into something that looks legitimate on the surface, but maintains your power underneath. Laundering isn't just about money. It's about reputation, about influence, about building something that can't be destroyed by a single bullet or a single betrayal." Elena leaned forward, interested now. "You're talking about going corporate." "I'm talking about going untouchable," Samantha corrected. "Real estate development, political connections, legitimate businesses that generate real revenue and real power. You keep the core operations that fund everything, but you build a shell around them that's so clean, so respectable, that your enemies can't touch you without destroying themselves." Simon was quiet, his mind working through the implications, seeing the board she was describing. "That takes time, years probably, and the Castellanos won't wait years. They're moving now." "So you give them what they want," Samantha said, "or at least you make them think you are." "Explain." And she did, laid out a strategy so audacious, so completely counter to everything Simon had been taught, that Marcus actually laughed until he realized she was serious. The plan was simple in concept, but complex in execution. They would fake weakness, make it look like the attack on Samantha had rattled Simon and had made him vulnerable. They'd pull back from contested territories, seem to retreat, let the Castellanos think they were winning. And while the Castellanos were busy claiming what they thought was victory, Simon would be building something new, something his enemies wouldn't recognize as a threat until it was too late. "It's a gambit," Simon said slowly, "sacrificing pieces to control the endgame." "It's the only move that wins," Samantha replied. "Everything else is just delaying checkmate." Marcus shook his head. "The men won't understand. They'll think we're surrendering. We'll lose respect, lose loyalty." "Then you explain it to the ones who matter," Samantha said. "The ones smart enough to see past tomorrow, and the ones who can't see it, who only understand violence and territory. Maybe they're not the ones you need in the organization you're building." It was a radical idea. It was dangerous. It was possibly insane. But as Simon looked at Samantha, at this woman who'd walked into his world and seen possibilities he'd been blind to, he realized something that should have terrified him, but instead felt like relief. He trusted her judgment more than his own instincts, trusted her strategic mind more than the lessons his father had beaten into him. "We do it," he said, and watched Marcus's face go pale. "We play Samantha's game." The question that kept Simon awake that night, staring at the ceiling while Samantha slept beside him, was simple but profound. Could a man built for violence learn to build instead of destroy? Could someone who'd spent a decade being his father's son become something else entirely? And if he did change, if he did evolve into something new, would he still be himself? Or would he lose whatever core made him who he was? The next 6 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Simon began the retreat, pulling his people back from contested areas, letting the Castellanos claim territory without a fight. His soldiers were confused, angry, questioning his leadership. 3 of his captains defected, taking their crews with them, thinking Simon had gone soft. Marcus nearly quit twice, convinced they were committing organizational suicide. But Elena understood what Samantha was doing, saw the long game, and helped sell it to the people who mattered. And while everyone was watching the territories change hands, while the Castellanos were celebrating their apparent victory, and Simon's other rivals were circling like sharks smelling blood, Samantha was building the foundation of something new. She discovered she had a gift for this, for seeing how the legitimate world and the criminal world intersected, for finding the pressure points where money and influence could be converted into power that didn't require violence to maintain. She set up shell corporations, identified real estate opportunities in developing neighborhoods, made connections with politicians and business people who didn't know or didn't care where Simon's money came from, as long as it kept flowing. She was careful, methodical, playing the long game the way her father had taught her, thinking not just 3 moves ahead, but 30. And somewhere in the process of building Simon's future, she found her own purpose again. Found that her intelligence, the thing that had isolated her for so long, was actually her greatest asset. She wasn't just Simon's girlfriend or his strategist. She was becoming a power in her own right. Someone his people respected and his enemies underestimated. But power has a price, and Samantha was about to learn what that price looked like. It happened on a gray December morning when she was meeting with a city councilman about a zoning variance for one of their development projects. She'd gotten good at these meetings, at playing the role of legitimate businesswoman, at smiling and negotiating, and never letting anyone see the chess game she was really playing. The meeting went well. The councilman agreed to support their proposal. Samantha left feeling like they were actually going to pull this off, actually going to transform Simon's empire into something sustainable. She didn't notice the car following her until it was too late. They grabbed her in the parking garage, 3 men moving with professional efficiency, a hand over her mouth before she could scream, a needle in her neck before she could fight. The world went fuzzy, then dark, and when she woke up, she was in a warehouse that smelled like rust and old blood, tied to a chair, her head pounding from whatever they'd drugged her with. Across from her sat a man she recognized from the files Simon had shown her. Vincent Castellano, the head of the family that had been at war with the Jordans for 2 generations. He was older than she expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face that might have been handsome once, before violence and time had carved it into something harder. "Miss Gray," he said, his voice surprisingly cultured. "I apologize for the dramatic introduction, but you've been difficult to reach through conventional channels." Samantha's mind was racing, running through everything Simon had taught her about hostage situations, about negotiation, about survival. "If you're planning to use me as leverage against Simon, you should know he doesn't negotiate with people who take what's his." Castellano smiled. "Oh, I'm not planning to negotiate. I'm planning to have a conversation. You see, I've been watching you, Miss Gray, watching what you've been building, the moves you've been making, and I have to admit, I'm impressed. You've done in 6 weeks what Simon's been unable to do in 10 years. You found a way forward that doesn't end in blood. Then why am I here? Because I want to offer you a choice." Castellano leaned forward, his eyes sharp and calculating. "You can continue helping Simon Jordan, continue building his empire, continue being loyal to a man whose father killed my brother and whose organization has been a thorn in my side for decades. Or," he paused for effect, "you can help me instead. Bring me your strategies, your connections, your brilliant mind. I'll pay you 10 times whatever Simon's giving you. Set you up with your own operation, make you powerful in your own right instead of just being his pet genius. It was a test. Samantha understood that immediately. Castellano didn't actually expect her to betray Simon. He was measuring her, seeing what she was made of, determining whether she was a true threat or just a smart girl playing at being a gangster, and how she responded would determine whether she left this warehouse alive. "You're right that I've found a way forward," Samantha said carefully, "but you're wrong about why. I'm not doing this for money or power. I'm doing it because I care about Simon and because I'm tired of watching intelligent people destroy each other over territory and pride and their father's grudges. Your war with the Jordans has cost both families decades of bloodshed. For what? So you can control a few more blocks? So you can say you won? Careful, Miss Gray, you're in no position to lecture me. I'm in exactly the position to lecture you because I'm the only person in this room who isn't trapped by the past." Samantha met his eyes, refusing to look away. "You want to know what I'd do if I were you? I'd take the same deal I'm building for Simon. I'd find a way to legitimize your operation, to transform it into something that can last beyond your lifetime. And I'd stop wasting resources fighting a war that neither side can win." Castellano stared at her for a long moment, and Samantha couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if she'd just signed her own death warrant or earned his respect. Then slowly he started to laugh. "You've got a spine, I'll give you that. Simon's a lucky man." He stood, walked to the door, then paused. "I'm going to let you go, Miss Gray, not because I'm merciful, but because I'm curious. I want to see if you can actually pull off what you're attempting. And if you do," he smiled, "well, maybe there's room in this city for a new way of doing things after all." 2 hours later, Samantha was back in Simon's penthouse, wrapped in a blanket, drinking tea that Elena had made, while Simon paced like a caged animal and Marcus coordinated a response to the Castellanos that would have started a full-scale war if Samantha hadn't stopped them. "He let me go," she said for the third time. "He wasn't trying to kill me or ransom me. He was testing me." "Testing you for what?" Simon demanded, his voice raw with barely controlled fury. "To see if I was real, if what we're building is real. And I think—" Samantha paused, the pieces clicking together in her mind. "I think he's tired, Simon. Tired of the war, tired of the violence, tired of living the way your fathers lived. He just doesn't know how to stop without looking weak." "So what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we offer him the same thing we're building for ourselves. A way out, a way forward. We turn your biggest enemy into your biggest ally." Marcus exploded. "That's insane. The Castellanos have been trying to destroy us for 20 years. You can't just—" "Why not?" Samantha interrupted. "What's the alternative? We go to war, lose more people, maybe win, maybe lose, and even if we win, there's another family waiting to take their place. Or we change the game. We build something big enough that there's room for everyone who's smart enough to evolve." Simon stopped pacing, turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Not just love, not just respect, but genuine awe. "You're talking about ending a generational war. I'm talking about winning it, really winning it, not by destroying your enemies, but by making them irrelevant." It was the most audacious move yet, the kind of strategy that would either revolutionize everything or get them all killed. But as Simon looked at Samantha, at this woman who'd walked into his life over a chessboard and somehow became the architect of his salvation, he realized that he'd already made his choice. He'd made it the night she first beat him, the night he realized that losing to her felt more like winning than any victory he'd ever had. "Set up a meeting," he told Marcus, "with Castellano, neutral ground, just the four of us. Me, him, Samantha, and you. Boss, this is—" "In order, Marcus. Set it up." The meeting happened 3 days later in a private room at an upscale restaurant, the kind of place where powerful people made deals that changed the city without anyone outside knowing it happened. Castellano came with his own second, a woman named Sophia who had the same sharp intelligence in her eyes that Elena had. And for 2 hours, they talked. Not about territory or revenge or the past, but about the future. about what they could build together if they stopped trying to destroy each other, about legitimacy and power and legacy. It wasn't easy. There were moments when old grudges surfaced, when the weight of history threatened to collapse the whole negotiation. But Samantha kept bringing them back to the board, kept showing them the moves that led to mutual victory instead of mutual destruction. And slowly, impossibly, a framework emerged. A partnership that would allow both families to transition into legitimate operations while maintaining their core interests, a structure that turned competition into collaboration. When they finally shook hands, when Vincent Castellano and Simon Jordan agreed to end a war that had defined both their lives, Samantha felt something she hadn't felt since her father died. She felt proud, felt like she'd used her mind not just to survive, but to actually make the world, or at least her small corner of it, better. The next 6 months were a blur of activity, of building and negotiating and transforming. The other families watched in confusion as the Jordans and Castellanos stopped fighting and started cooperating. Some tried to take advantage of what they thought was weakness. Those families learned quickly that the alliance was stronger than either organization had been separately. Others, the smart ones, asked to join. And slowly, the entire structure of organized crime in the city began to shift and began to evolve into something that looked more like a business consortium than a collection of warring tribes. Simon changed too. The hard edges softened. The constant tension in his shoulders eased. He smiled more, laughed more, and started to look like a man who could imagine a future beyond survival. He and Samantha moved into a house together, a real house with a garden and neighbors who didn't know or care about his past. They played chess every night, but now it was just for fun, just for the joy of the game, without the weight of loneliness that had brought them together. And Samantha, she found that she'd built something she never expected. A life that mattered, work that challenged her, a purpose that honored her father's memory by using the gifts he'd given her. She started a consulting firm, helping other organizations transition from illegal to legitimate operations, becoming known in certain circles as the woman who could see around corners, who could find the path forward when everyone else saw only walls. But the question that matters, the one that determines whether this is really a happy ending or just a pause before the next crisis, is this. Can people really change? Can someone built for violence become a builder? Can a woman running from grief become someone who helps others find hope? Can two lonely people who found each other over a chessboard actually build something that lasts? On a warm spring evening, almost a year after that first game, Samantha and Simon sat on their back porch, the chess set between them, the city lights visible in the distance. Simon moved his knight, an aggressive opening that Samantha recognized immediately. "You're getting predictable," she said, countering with a pawn advance. "Maybe I'm just comfortable," Simon replied. "Comfortable enough to not have to hide my strategies. Comfortable is how you lose games. Good thing this isn't about winning anymore." Simon looked up at her, his expression soft in the fading light. "It's just about playing, about having someone to play with." Samantha felt her throat tighten with emotion. "My father used to say that chess teaches you everything you need to know about life. Strategy, patience, sacrifice, the importance of thinking ahead. What else did he teach you? That the best games are the ones where both players are challenged, where you're not trying to destroy your opponent, but to understand them, to engage with them, to create something beautiful together, even in competition." She moved her bishop, setting up a complex middle game. "I think he'd like you. I think he'd approve of what we've built." "I hope so," Simon said quietly, "because everything good in my life started the night you sat down across from me and showed me that losing could feel like winning." They played until the stars came out, until the pieces were barely visible in the darkness, until Samantha finally called checkmate and Simon laughed and reset the board for another game. Because that's what they did now. They played, they built, they loved, they lived. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but authentically, honestly, with the kind of partnership that only comes when two people see each other completely and choose each other anyway. The war was over. The empire was transformed. The lonely waitress and the feared crime boss had become something neither of them expected. They'd become partners, equals, Two strategists playing the same game on the same side. And if you've made it this far, if you've watched Samantha and Simon's journey from that first chess game to this moment of hard-won peace, I want you to do something for me. I want you to leave a comment right now telling me about a time when you had to make an impossible choice, when you had to decide between safety and connection, between running from your past and building your future. Tell me what you chose and whether you'd make the same choice again. Because Samantha's story isn't just about chess or crime or romance. It's about the courage it takes to be seen, to be vulnerable, to risk everything for the chance at something real. And I want to know your story too. So comment below, hit that subscribe button, and let's keep this conversation going. Because the best stories aren't the ones we watch, they're the ones we live.